Hello, extraordinary people. If you're looking to transition your life from where you are to where God wants you to be, then you're in the right place. And if this is your first time visiting my channel, why don't you go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss one episode. Now today, I'm glad you joined me because today I'm going to share with you the very thing that is standing between you and the place where God wants you to be. So stay tuned. Over the course of my life, I've heard a lot of bizarre stories. And the one I'm about to share with you today is really no different. You see, there once lived a woman whose life was less than ideal. Her life was this way not because of anything she had done, but because of circumstances that were completely out of her control. Day in and day out, she worked at a job that she hated. She hated this job. It didn't give her the freedom to vacation or take sick days. There was no room for growth. Her boss was cruel and very disrespectful, and there were even times when he would put his hands on her, physically abusing her if her performance didn't meet his standards. There was no HR department for her to complain to because all of upper management were in cahoots with each other. She went to work early and left work late, and in return, she wasn't blessed with a great big old salary. Instead, she was provided a place to lay her head and food to fill her belly. Now, often, she would plead with God to change her circumstances and to remove her from this horrible place because her life was miserable, and she could not accept the fact that this was all life had to offer. She wanted more out of life, and she wanted to be in a better place, a place where she could be free. Then one day, opportunity knocked, and she packed up all her things and began heading to a better place. A place where she'd be happy and free from all the terrible things that she had once experienced. A place where she was promised great things would be in store for her. But then, something strange happened along her journey to that better place. She began to make comments that were nothing short of bizarre. She began to say things like, it wasn't so bad at my old job. I didn't get paid that much, but at least they fed me. And you know what? Forget this bright and glorious future. I'd be better off working at my old job until the day I died. What? What is this woman thinking? But if you're familiar with the story of the children of Israel found in the Old Testament of the Bible, then you'll recognize that the story I just shared with you represents the twisted mentality of an Israelite who God has just freed from Egypt. Because after having been in bondage for centuries and finally being miraculously set free, thoughts of returning to Egypt should have never crossed their minds. And the reality is that truly, in their heart of hearts, they didn't want to return to Egypt. The problem was they couldn't handle the wilderness. But the reality is that many of us can't handle the wilderness either. And I know this because it's the wilderness that stands between you and where God wants you to be. Now, in the case of the Israelites, it's easy to see that Egypt could in no way, shape, or form compare to the Promised Land. In Egypt, they worked under taskmasters. But in the Promised Land, they would work for themselves. In Egypt, they worked to build Pharaoh's dreams. But in the Promised Land, they'd work to fulfill their own dreams. In Egypt, their work provided no sense of fulfillment. But in the Promised Land, they would be fulfilled. It's so obvious. There was no comparison. The Promised Land, the land flowing with milk and honey, was the place that the Israelites should desire to be. So you have to wonder, what would cause them to reflect fondly on Egypt, their place of bondage? Well, the answer can be found in Exodus 16, verse 3. And the children of Israel said unto them, Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. The reason the Israelites desired to go back to Egypt is because they couldn't handle the perceived uncertainty of the wilderness. They couldn't see where their next meal was coming from, so a lack of faith in their loving God caused them to desire to go back to Egypt, a place they despised but a place where they felt security in knowing where their next meal was coming from. And the reality is that many people, like the Israelites, will choose security over destiny and miss out on the amazing things God has in store for them because they can't handle the wilderness. What we have to understand is that the wilderness is a tool God uses to take us from where we are to where He wants us to be. Because it's in the wilderness that He prepares us for the promised land. It's in the wilderness where He will refine our faith and fix our characters and prepare us to be individuals who can handle all the blessings that the promised land has to offer. But to get to your promised land, you have to first get through the wilderness. And in the wilderness, you're going to be uncomfortable. You won't see what's coming next because in the wilderness, God is teaching you to rely upon Him and Him alone. Now, we all have our Egypts because Egypt represents any situation you are in your life that isn't God's best for you. And most times you'll know you're in Egypt when you aren't experiencing God's peace in a situation and you aren't fulfilled. Now, Egypt can present itself in many different ways in our lives. For example, it can present itself as a relationship that isn't great and it isn't fulfilling, but it provides a sense of so-called security because in your mind, it's better than being in the wilderness of loneliness or uncertainty as to whether or not the true man or woman of your dreams will ever show up. So instead of journeying through the wilderness to get to the promised land, which in this case represents God's choice for your life, you remain in the relationships of Egypt and settle for less than God's best for your life. Maybe your Egypt is a job that just isn't working for you. It's paying the bills, but you're far from fulfilled, and the thought of stepping into the wilderness of uncertainty has kept you from heading to the promised land, the land where your career aligns with your passions and will provide you with the fulfillment and the happiness that your soul so desperately needs. Now, I'm not just talking here. I've actually experienced many Egypt-type situations myself, which required me to go through the wilderness to get to my promised land. I mean, I know how it feels to be in an Egypt-type relationship and staying in longer than you should because the wilderness doesn't seem so appealing and the relationship provides somewhat of a sense of security. I also know how it feels to tough it out and make it through the wilderness to the promised land, which represents the man God chose for you. Got to give a shout out to my baby. But even now, I know how the wilderness experience feels because I'm in my own situation where God is taking me from Egypt to my promised land. And since I've been in the wilderness, I've gone through several stages. The stage of feeling uneasy because I can't see how God is going to move, as well as looking back at Egypt as if Egypt could provide more security than what my God can provide. Then I move on to the stage where God wants me to be, in which I finally accepted His peace and chose to trust Him completely. And let me tell you how amazing God is. Because now that I've been here, some things that I've been expecting to receive that I haven't received and that did not make sense finally came through to me. I wasn't receiving the thing I was supposed to for who knows what reason. And I have been trying for months and months and months and months trying to figure out why am I not receiving this thing? I couldn't figure it out. Then when I was out of Egypt in the middle of the wilderness, out of nowhere without any explanation, that thing I've been praying about showed up. My blessing. And it far exceeded any expectations I had because for over a year I had been trying to figure this thing out and I hadn't done anything wrong. But what I realized is God was saying, now that I know that you're truly ready to travel through the wilderness to get to your promised land, now I can open the doors for you and pour out the blessings for you to help you get there. And let me tell you, my mind is blown away. I'm blown away at how my God is working in my wilderness situation. Now, a while back, I heard the story of a man who had found himself in Egypt. And in his story, Egypt represents a high-paying corporate job. On the outside, it appears as if he had it all. Money, cars, big house, but he wasn't fulfilled. So this man who had a family to support did something crazy. He walked away from the security of a very high-paying job and entered into the wilderness as he was journeying to his promised land, the land of his purpose. Now he began to do what he loved, which involved him helping people live healthy lives. But he was still in the wilderness because his passion didn't provide the monetary rewards that his past career did. But he kept pushing. And along his journey, people consistently questioned his decision making, telling him that he neglected his family and he needed to return to his job where he had financial security. But he didn't listen. Instead, he determined to keep pushing through the wilderness. Things got so bad that this grown man had to pack up his family and move in with his in-laws. But he didn't even let that stop him. He was determined. And after years of struggling, this man reached his promised land. Now, money, that's no longer an issue. This man is balling, making significantly more money than he made in his past career, which again was extremely lucrative. But now his life is so much better, not because of the money, but because he's operating in his purpose. Yes, his wilderness experience was tough, but it was well worth it because now he has a legacy of valuable lessons that he can pass on to his children, teaching them the importance of pursuing your dreams and your passions. So what about you? Are you stuck in Egypt? Are you in a place in your life where you don't feel fulfilled and you know that God has something more for you? Are you in a relationship that you know good and well you need to move out of, but you only remaining because you feel secure in Egypt? What is going on in your life? And what is it that God wants to take you out of and move you to? Now, here's the thing about God. Our journeys to the wilderness will not be easy. They're going to be scary. And it's okay. And I want to encourage you because God's job is not to keep us in the wilderness. It's to lead us through the wilderness to the promised land. And that's what you have to remember. So, what do you think about this whole wilderness journey? Let's talk about it. Are you stuck in Egypt? Have you been in Egypt? Are you in the wilderness? Are you in the promised land? Why don't you leave a comment below, share with me, share with others so we can encourage each other. Because at the end of the day, it's all about getting from where we are to where God wants us to be. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you next week. And as always, remember that you are extraordinary through Christ. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. God bless.